this video, we're going to create a to-do list with Laravel on the back end and Vue.js on the front end. So let's open up our terminal and make sure we have the right programs installed. First thing I want to do is confirm that Composer is installed. We'll do composer-V, and we have 2.0.6. Let's confirm that npm is installed, so we'll do npm-v, and we have 6.14.6. And let's make sure that PHP is installed, and we'll do php-v, and we have 7.4.3. I'm going to clear this out. Now, since Composer is installed, the first thing I want to do is we're going to use composer create -project -prefer-dist, and then Laravel/Laravel, and then the name of our project. Since this is a to-do list, I'm going to call it to-do list. All right, so our Laravel project has been created. Let's go ahead and cd into our to-do list. I'm going to use PHP artisan serve, and that should spin up a web server for me. And let's open up this URL right here in our browser. Cool. So our Laravel application is installed. It's being served up at port 8000, and we can see the default Laravel application installation here. The next thing I want to do is open up VS Code, and let's see our project. File, open, and we'll do our to-do list, the root folder. The first thing I want to do on my project is I'm going to open up the env file. This is the environment file, which holds all of our database connection information. If you're using Broadcast, Redis, any mail setup, AWS, your pusher information, and more pusher information. So I want to set up a database since we're going to be using Laravel with a MySQL backend. I've already created a database. It's called To-Do List. My username is going to be Scripster, and my password is just password. If you're doing this in production, pick some more secure information. Since this is just a demo, I wanted to keep it simple. The only other thing I want to do in here is change the name of our app, and I'm just going to call it To-Do List, and that should be good. Command S to save. Since we use Composer to set up our project, we already created our app key, so we don't have to worry about that. That's been done for us. If you haven't already, just make sure that you've created a database, give it a name, give it a user login and password, and make sure that's reflected right here. That should be it for our .env file. I'm going to open up the terminal again now because I want to create a model and a migration file for our database now that it's linked. I'm just going to open up a new tab in my terminal. And for this, to create a model with a migration file, we can use the PHP artisan make model. We're just going to call it item and then -m. All right, so we can see our model was successfully created, and it also created this migration file, create items table. So let's go take a look at that. Up here in our database folder under migrations, we should see items table. What that command did for us, it created this migration file, and by default we get a public function up and a public function down. So what we want to do is we want to add some columns to our new items table, and I'm going to do that right here. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to do a string, and whenever anybody adds an item, I want to give it a name. So I'm just going to use name here. And then I also want to add table, and this one's going to be a Boolean because I just want true or false if this item's been completed. And we're just going to set a default value for this. By default, whenever a new item's created, I just want it to be set to false because if it's just created, you haven't done it yet. The next thing I want to do is track whenever an item is marked as completed. So this is going to be a timestamp, and we'll just call it completed at, and we're going to set this to nullable because if we haven't completed the item yet, we're not going to have a timestamp for it. And we can leave the default table ID and the default timestamps. So now that our database is connected in our .env file, we created our migration file. Let's go ahead and run the migration and make sure that it created this table along with these columns for us. Go ahead and save this, Command S to save, and then let's jump back over into the terminal. I'll clear this out, and to run this migration, we can use PHP artisan migrate. And there we go. We can see that it migrated this file, and along with some other files that were in the migration by default, we're not going to use those, but our create items table has been migrated. So we should be good. Let's go ahead and move on to our controller so that our Laravel application can now talk to this table. We'll open up our VS Code again, and I'm going to close this out for now. We shouldn't need it. I shouldn't need this .env anymore. And if we come up here to our app HTTP controllers, we just have a default controller, but we want to create our item controller. So we can do that with the terminal command, and I'm just going to clear this out again. And this command is going to be a little bit longer, but we should be able to do PHP artisan make controller, and then item controller. That's going to be the name of it. And then we're going to do -- resource. And what this resource does for us is it tells the controller when you create it, create all the resource functions for us. And that's just going to save us some time. It's just going to lay out our controller file for us. So go ahead and press enter. Our controller was created successfully. So if we go back over to our VS Code, we now have this new item controller. I'm going to click on that. So now we have a controller. We're going to use this to talk to our database. But before we do that, I want to use the routes file to point to these individual functions. So let's go ahead and point some routes at these, and then we'll write these up so that they do something. Our routes file, you can do this in a few places. I like to do this in the API. A lot of times when I'm writing software, I'm talking to an API backend. You could do this with the web and create blade files. If you wanted to, you could use this right here and create all your routes here and create some blade files inside of your resources and then views. But I'm going to do this in a Vue front end, and I'm just going to use API routes. So go ahead and open up your routes, click on api.php, and let's pop some routes in here. So the first route I want is just the default route. It's going to be my domain /API/items. And that's just going to grab all items inside of my database. So we'll do route : get. And I just want to grab /items. After the word items, or after our route, we're going to put a comma and then pass it an array. And this first item in the array is going to say which controller to use. So we're going to do item controller : class, and then comma, and the next thing is going to be the specific function that we want this route to hit. For this route, I want it to hit index. The other thing before we get too far along is I need to import this item controller right here so we can use it. So I'm going to do use app/http/controllers/item controller, and we should be good. So now that we've imported it right here, we've said to use this item controller, this should work. So make sure you put the semicolon at the end. Now that we have our items route, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a route, and this time I'm going to use prefix. I want to prefix it with /item. We're going to put that all in a group, and for the group, we'll use function. And now let's define some routes inside of this /item group. The first route I'm going to do is we'll do route post, and this will be the create or the store function. So we'll just call this route /store. We'll put a comma, we'll pass in our array, and the first item inside of our array is going to be item controller. Then we'll do our : class again, a comma, and now the second parameter in the array is the specific function inside of our item controller that we want this store. It's going to hit /item/store, and then which function do we want it to hit? In this instance, I want it to hit the store function. So we'll put store right there, and let's just go ahead and replicate this. For this route, I'm going to use a put, and for put, we can use our curly braces and pass in the ID. So it'll hit item/ and whatever ID I pass with this route will automatically go into our item controller, and I want this to go into the update function. So when I write this update function in a couple minutes, I'll be able to grab the ID that was passed in with the route and use it to find the ID of whatever item I want to update. And the last thing I want to put in here is delete. And I also want to use the curly braces on this one to pass in an ID, and we're going to use that ID to grab the ID of a specific item to delete it. And we're going to hit the item controller, and we want the destroy function this time inside of our item controller. So we should have 4 new routes. We have items, so it'll be our root domain /API because we're in the routes API file /items, which is right here. And then it'll be root domain /API /item /store, and then our root domain /API /item /an ID that we're going to pass. And then also the same route again, but we're going to pass it, instead of using the put, we're going to pass it as a delete. And I'm getting a little 1 right here with a squiggly, so let me just fix this real quick. We're going to put this down. I just want to fix up the indentation, and that should be good to go. So make sure you add your ending semicolon after this. So we're all saved. So let's go ahead and write that controller. So we should be able to close this API file right now. We're going to go back up to our item controller, and now we should have some routes that are going to hit these controller functions. Let's go ahead and write our first function. The first thing I want to do is I want to bring in the model. We created the model over here when we used our command, and this item model, it automatically created this file for us. So now we can use it, and it's going to point to that table in our database. So we'll come over here and let's just add it right here. We'll say use app /models/item. We've told our program we want to use it. We can use it down here. So the first thing I want to do is, if you come in the regular /API /items, it hits this index function. I want it to just return any of the items in my to-do list. So let's say return, we've already imported the item, so we'll do item, and then we'll say order by. Now, when we originally created this, we said use the timestamps, which creates 2 columns in our database table. One of them is called created at. So we'll use created at. So I want to order, when I grab all these items, I want to order by the created at column, and I want to order by descending. So I want whatever the newest item is at the top of the list. And then we can use the arrow and we'll say get, and we're going to return all those items. That should be good for our index function. And before this will work, we need to add some items into our database, or else it's just going to pull an empty return. So I just want to save this, and let's go down, and we're going to pass over this create function since we're not using blade files. You could use this in here. We're going to skip it, and let's go down here to our store. So the next thing we want to do is when we receive a request, we want to store it. When we hit /API /item /store, it's going to go right here to this function. And what do we want to do when we hit this function? We want to save a new item. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to create a variable and call it new item. We'll set it to new, and then the item model that we imported up here. So we're saying create a new one of these. All right, and the only thing we have in here that we want to set is the name. So I'm going to say new item name, and I want to set it to the request that we received. I know that when I send this in, I'm going to have an object called item, and it's going to contain a property called name. So I'm going to say item. Inside of item, we're going to have name. So I'll say name. And the last thing we need to do is save this. So we should be able to say, take this new item and save. And once it's saved, we're going to return the new item. So our browser knows that this was saved successfully. Now that we have our store function set up and our index function set up, let's see if we can store a new item and return it. So I'm just going to save that, and I want to open up Postman, and let's create a new item. So we know it needs to be post. We know it's going to go to http:// For this, I'm going to use 127.0.0.1, and it's at port 8000. And we said we're going to use API routes. So we'll use API /item/ and we want to hit the store function. And we already created this route a couple minutes ago. So now that we have our route up here, I'm going to change my headers. I just want to have another header down here, and we're going to say content dash type, and it's going to be application slash JSON. So now we have our content type. We're going to click on body, and I'm going to do raw data, and we're going to pass it this request. We said we are going to have an object called item, and inside that object, we're going to have a property called name. So let's pass our to-do list a name. I'm just going to say, take out the trash. That's going to be the first item on my to-do list. And let's send this over. Cool. We didn't have to tell it the created at and the updated at. It automatically populated that information for us. Now that we were able to create an item, let's make sure our index function's working and returning this item to us. So this time we're going to use get. We'll use the same route, except this time we're just going to leave it at API/items because we just want to get all the items. And that's all we should need. So let's hit send. And it returned our only item in the database right now. We can see that our completed at is null, completed is 0. We have our name, we have our ID, and then we have our created at and our updated at. So let's keep going. The next thing I want to do is create our update function. So now that we have an item in here, if we wanted to update it with completed and completed at, we need to have our update function working. So let's open up our VS Code again, and we're going to skip over show and edit, and we're going to move right down to our update. We said earlier we're going to pass an ID. In this instance, we only have one item in our database, so our ID is probably going to be 1, but we're going to dynamically grab that off of the incoming route, and we're saying we want to use that ID in our function. So that's what this is right here. Let's go ahead and we're going to call this existing item because we want to grab an item from our database that already exists. So we can say existing item. We're going to set that equal to item and then find, and we want to pass it the ID that we received in our route. So we're saying find this item by the ID. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You could use find or fail. I kind of like doing it this way because it allows me to specify what I want to happen if this item isn't found. If you want to use the default Laravel setup with the find or fail, that's fine as well. This is just a way that I've kind of grown accustomed to doing it. So I'm going to say if, and we're going to say existing item. So if there's an existing item, I want to do something. What do I want to do? I want to save that item. So we're going to say existing item. I want to see if this item was completed. So we're going to say completed because that's the column we want to update. So I want to set this completed property to true or false. And to do that, I need to grab some information out of my request. I want to check for item and then completed. Now this is going to be true or false. So I'm going to say whatever this value is it true or is it false? We're going to use our ternary operator. And basically what we're saying is check if this is true. If it's true, set it to true. Otherwise, set it to false. And then the next thing I want to do is almost exactly the same. So we're going to duplicate that and we're going to say completed at. We're going to check the same request item. So if this completed is set to true, we want to update this completed at timestamp. We want to give it a date and time. So if this request item completed is true, we want to set the date and time. Otherwise, we want to set it to null. In order to set the date and time, Laravel has carbon, and we should be able to say carbon now, and it'll grab right now, the timestamp for right now. But in order to use this, we need to say that we're going to use it at the top of our file. So let's go ahead and bring that in. We'll use illuminate /support/carbon. And now we should be able to use carbon down here in our update function. Now that we have carbon and we're able to do the timestamp, let's also do existing item save because we want to save it now. And then we'll just return existing item. Now, for some reason, this doesn't work. If no existing item is found, I'm just going to do, for right now, I want to keep it easy. Sometimes I get pretty specific in these return values. I'm just going to say item not found. So if an item is found, go ahead and do all this. If no item is found, the existing item doesn't exist, we're just going to return item not found. Now that this function is created, let's try it out in Postman. I'm going to create a new request. This time we're going to use put, and our URL is going to be almost the same. This time we want to pass in the ID because we want to grab that ID of 1, our first and only item in our to-do list. So go ahead and we'll use API/item because we've already created this item group, and inside of it we're using the put, and we want to grab the first item or item with the ID of 1. The next thing I'm going to do is back in my headers, I want to make sure I have content-type and then application JSON. We'll jump over to our body. We're going to use raw again, and let's send it some raw JSON. We're going to do item. That item is an object. The item does have a name, but we're not going to allow people to change the name, at least not for this tutorial. We just want to update whether or not the item's been completed. So we're going to do completed, and we're going to set it to true. And then let's go ahead and send it. And we can see that our ID 1 name is take out the trash, completed has been set to true, and completed at now has a time. So we stored the time that it was completed at. We also set another return value. So let's just send it an item that doesn't exist, and hopefully we'll get that other return value back. Cool. So we got item not found because there is no item 2 yet. So our update is working. Let's move on and do our delete. So we'll come down here to our last one. This is our public function destroy. We're going to do it very similarly to how we did our update. I'm going to grab it the same way. We'll say existing item. We'll set it equal to item find. We'll find it by ID. Then we'll say if existing item. So if you find an item by that ID, we want you to existing item and then delete. The next thing we want to do is return item successfully deleted. And if no item was found, go ahead and return item not found. Cool. Let's jump back over to Postman and see if we can delete that item. I'm going to copy this URL. We're going to do a delete, and we want to delete item 1. So let's send this over, and we have item successfully deleted. We come back over here to our get function and we run this again. The first time we ran it, we were able to receive this information. Let's see, we're not expecting to get anything back this time since there's no items. So let's send this again. And we got an empty array because there's no items left. We deleted the only item that there was. At this point, we should be ready and set up with our backend. So I'm going to close out Postman. Now that we know that it all works, I can close out this controller. Let's go ahead and start our front end. We're going to build out our Vue front end right now. So to get started on that, let's open up our terminal again. All right, the first thing I want to do is run npm install to install all of our package.json dependencies. The next thing I want to do is install Vue, npm install Vue. This is Laravel 8. It used to be done differently in Laravel 7, so I need to install Vue through npm. All right, now Vue's installed, so I'm going to clear this out, and let's jump back over to VS Code, and we're going to create some of our views. So down here in our resources, we have JS, and I'm going to create a new folder in here, and I'm just going to call it Vue because this is where I want to store all of my Vue files. Inside of my Vue folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm just going to call it app.vue. We'll have template. And inside of my template, I'm just going to create a div, and it's just going to say hello just for now, and then div. And then let's add our script tags, and that should be good. So we just have a basic skeleton of our app.vue file. Now that we have our app.vue file, I want to go ahead and open up my app.js file. Now let's go ahead and import Vue from Vue. And now that we imported Vue, I want to tell it to use my app.vue file. So we'll do import app from Vue/app. And that should be good. Now let's go ahead and create a new Vue instance. So we'll do const app equals new Vue. And then we'll say L for element. We want to set it to an ID of app, and then comma, and then we're going to pass in our components, and we want to pass it our app component that we just created. So we'll say app. That should be good for that. Now that we have our app.js file and we're pointing it to our app.vue file, we want to tell it inside of our PHP welcome blade to use this Vue instance that we just created. So I'm going to open up my welcome blade, and I should be able to delete all of this. We don't need any of this. So let's just go ahead. We're going to get rid of that. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of these divs. We don't need any of them. And I'm going to get rid of this. And let's just go ahead and create our div ID, and we're going to set it to app. That ID that we just said we want to point our Vue instance to is going to go right here. And then we'll just say app. And the next thing we want to do is, now that we've created a div element with an ID of app and we said we're going to put our Vue app right here, let's go ahead and we need to import it. So we're going to do script src equals, and we're going to use Laravel mix for this. So we'll say mix, and we'll use js/app.js. We'll close that off and we'll add our script. So what's happening here is we're using Laravel mix, which is our Webpack mix right here. And we're saying whenever a change happens, we want to grab our resources, which is right here, our resources, JS, and then app.js. And we want to recompile it and then put it into public.js. It's doing the same thing for us automatically if we're using our app.css file. So by using Laravel mix, we're pointing it at the compiled version of our application. So I should be able to save that. If we open up our web browser, we should see hello. The only other thing we need to do is we're going to open up our terminal again. Now that we said we're going to use Laravel mix and we want to recompile our assets whenever changes happen, we have to use npm run hot, and that's going to do hot reloads for us. All right, now we're watching our project folder. Let's open up Chrome again and let's refresh our app. And there we go. We're now looking at our Vue instance. Now that we're all linked up, let's go ahead and create our Vue components. I'm going to open up VS Code again. I should be able to close out this welcome blade. We'll get rid of this Webpack mix, and I'm going to close app.js for right now as well. Now I know for my to-do list, I need a form component. I want to be able to add new items to my list. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it add item form.vue. And I'm just going to create the general scaffolding. So we'll do our template and we'll do our script. And I'm just going to say div, and we'll just say this is the form. I'll save this for right now. I'm actually going to copy all this. I just want to create the general files that I'm going to need. I usually do this when I start a new project. I have a basic idea of the layout. So now that I have my add form component, I want to create a list view to show all the items in my list. So we'll just call it list view.view, and let's just paste that general template in here, and we'll just say list view, and I'll save that. And the only other thing I want to do, my list view is actually going to loop through each item in my list. So I want to list item or item view. So let's just add one more component, and I'm just going to call it list item.view, and we'll put our general scaffolding in there, and I'll just say list item. We'll save that. Now that I have my basic file structure laid out, let's go ahead and open up our app.vue. This is our entry point to our application right here. Let's set up how we want our to-do list to look. Inside of my root div, I'm just going to create a class, and we'll just call this to-do list container. And this is just going to be the container that houses the entire list. It's going to hold our add form, it's going to hold our list view, and also all of our list items. So this is just our to-do list container. And then inside of our container, let's go ahead, we'll put another div in here, and this is going to be our heading. So the top of our list, we'll just say class, and we'll call it heading. Let's go ahead and close that out as well. Inside of my heading, I want to put a title. So I'm just going to use an H2. I'll call it ID. We'll set it equal to title. And I just want to call this to-do list. And that's just going to be my title at the top of the page. The next thing I'm going to do, inside of my title, right underneath the to-do list, I want my form so people can add new items to the list. Before I can add my form component, because that's going to be right here, I have to import it. So let's jump down here to our script and we'll say import add item form to bring it in. And then we'll say from add item form. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we add it into our components, and we can say add item form. All right, and now we should be able to use it up here. So we'll just say add dash item dash form and just put a slash and end that off. So now we have our to-do list container. Inside of our container, we have our heading, and then inside of our heading, we have a title, and then we're including our add form inside of the header as well. The next thing I want to do is after our heading, I want to have my list. I want to list out all the items after the heading. We created this list view right here, and we're just going to import that. So we'll say import list view from list view, and then let's add it down here as well. So now we should be able to jump over here and we can say list dash view. Now that we have some elements on our page, let's go ahead and add some styling. So we'll do style scoped. The first thing we have is our to-do list, and that's a class. So we'll say to-do list container. I'm just going to give it a width of 350 pixels, and we'll do margin auto, so it should center it. The next thing we have is our heading. So let's give our heading some style. So we'll do dot heading. Let's set a background. So we'll do background, and we'll set that equal to, I'm just going to use a light gray. So E6, E6, E6. Let's give it some padding as well. We'll just do 10 pixels. And what else do we have up here? We have our to-do list, heading, title. Let's go ahead and give our title some styling. So that's an ID. So we'll say title. Let's just say text dash align, and we want to center it. So center our title inside of our heading. Let's take a look at that. Let's see how that looks. We'll open up Chrome again, and cool. So we have our to-do list, our form, and our list view, along with a little bit of styling. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see this better. Now that we have our basic layout, let's go create this form component. We'll jump back over to VS Code, open up our add item form. So we can get rid of this form word. We just wanted that to set things up. For our form containing div, I'm going to say, let's just create a class, and we'll call this add item, because this is going to be our add item form. Inside of our add item form, we're going to need an input. It'll be of type text. And let's just close that off for right now. And we're also going to want a button. So when the person types in their text, they're going to click a button, and that button will be the add button. So before we get too far along, let's go ahead and import some icons that we can use for that button. I'm going to use Font Awesome for this. So let's open up Chrome again, pull up a new tab, and we'll do View Font Awesome Icons. And I'm just going to click on GitHub project. For installation, we want to install the core package and icon content. So we're going to run both of these. And let's just open up a new tab. Make sure you're in your project folder, and we'll just paste that in there. All right, and let's open up Chrome again. We want to do the next one in the list as well. We'll paste that in. All right, we'll get back over to Chrome and follow the rest of the directions. And they're saying for using Vue.js, which is what we're using, we want to use this command right here. And we're just going to follow their usage down here. For usage recommended, we want to import our library, from Font Awesome SVG core. We want to import our specific icon that we're going to use. In this example, they're using FA user secret. And then from the Font Awesome free solid SVG icons, and then import Font Awesome as well. And they're telling us to set it up with library add, the icon that we're importing right here. And then we're creating this Vue component font awesome icon. I'm just going to copy this right here, and let's open up our VS Code again. And this is going to go in our app.js file. Let's go ahead, we'll bump that up, we'll paste that in there. They use the FA user secret. I want to use a different icon. I know that Vue has a FA plus square icon, so I want to import that. And I'm probably going to want to use a trash can icon later on when we want to delete any items in our list. So let's do FA trash, so we can use both of those icons. Now we just want to change our library add from FA user secret to FA plus square and FA trash. And that should be good. I'm going to save that. We're going to go back over to our add item form, and let's see if we can use these icons inside of our add item view form. Right after our input, let's go ahead and we have a font awesome dash icon. And let's jump down on the next line, do icon equals, and we want the plus dash square. And we'll just close that off as well. We're going to come back and add some click methods, but let's just make sure this is working. We'll jump back over to Chrome. We'll go to our Laravel project, and now we have this plus square right here. So our icon is working. So let's close this tab, go back over to our VS Code. Let's give this some style. Let's make our form look like something. At the very bottom, we'll say style scoped, and we have our class add item. So let's do add item. We'll say display flex. Let's do justify content center. Let's also do align items center. So we have our add item, Let's stylize this input a little bit. So we'll just say input, and let's give our input some style. We'll do background is, we'll go with F7, F7, F7. Let's remove the border. We'll do border 0. I don't want any outline on focus, so let's do outline none. Let's add some padding, and we'll just do 5 pixels on this. I also want to add a little margin so that there's some breathing space between our input and our plus icon button. So we'll just put 10 pixels between them, and let's just say width 100%. That way it fills up the entire available space. Let's save that. Let's go ahead and link this input to some data down here. So we'll do data function. We're going to return, and we said we'll have item, and that item will contain an object. That object will have a name. So we'll just set that to blank by default. And then we're going to use v-model, and we're going to link this input to our item name. So we can just do item.name. So now that the input is linked to some actual data, I want to change the color of this font awesome icon based on text being provided inside of our item name. So if there's no text provided, I just want to gray it out. I want it to look like you can't click on it. And then once some text is provided, I want to change the color so the button looks more clickable. So let's just do, we're going to use some class binding. So we'll do class equals. We'll put that in an array. And I want to check for the item name. So if there's an item name, if the item name is provided, I want to use the active class. Otherwise, I want to use inactive. So I still have to create these. And then by default, I'm just going to create a class, and we'll call it plus, or the plus icon. So whether or not it's inactive or not, we're always going to use the plus. But if anybody provides an item name, we're going to toggle between active and inactive. So let's create those down here in our style. So after input, let's create our default class of plus. We'll just say font dash size, and let's just give it a size of 20 pixels. And then also we got to create our .active. For active, I just want to change the color. So for an active color, I'll use 00CE25. So it's like a greenish color. So that should be good. And then for inactive, I want to kind of gray it out. So inactive, and we'll use color 999999. And that'll give us this grayish color. So we're all linked up now. I'm going to save that and let's just see what it looks like inside of Chrome. So we have our to-do list. We changed the styling of our input, and right now our button is grayed out. Let's see if we type. Cool. So if we add some text, it's going to change the color of our icon. It's exactly what we wanted. There's no text, our icon changes. We'll go back over to VS Code and let's put a click in here. So we'll do @click. We're going to set it to, we didn't create a method yet, but we will in a moment. So we'll just call it add item. So whenever you click on our font awesome icon, we want you to execute this method right here. So let's create that method. After our data, we'll put a comma and we'll say methods. And we call this method add item. Now, without getting too fancy with form validation, I'm just going to say if this.item.name is equal to nothing, I just want to return. So if there's no data provided, stop what you're doing and don't execute the rest of this function. But if there is data provided, we're going to use axios.post, and we should have API/item/store, and we want to pass it some data. For this, we just want to pass it item, and then we'll say this.item. So whatever the item is right here, if there's a name provided, we want to send that over and we're calling it item. And then we want to do something with it. So we'll say then, and we'll do response. We'll use our arrow functions and let's scroll up. When we receive our response, we'll do if response.status equals 201 because that's a successful creation. We want to reset the item name. So we'll do this item.name and we'll just set it to blank. I just paused the video. I wanted to point this out now, but I do end up fixing this later on down the road. You only want to use a single equal sign right here, not a double equal sign. And if there's an error, let's just say catch error. We'll use our arrow function and we'll just do console.log error. And you can handle this any way you want. I'm just doing this in case we get an error. I'm going to save this and let's see if we're able to add a new item to our list. We'll go back over to Chrome. So I'm going to open up Developer Tools. I'm on the Network tab and let's create a new item. I'm just going to call it Take Out the Trash. And when I click the plus button, we're expecting to see some network activity down here. So let's click plus and we hit our API item store. We have a status of 201. So that was a success. Let's click on that. So our API is working. We just created our first item. We have an ID of 1 and we returned the data for that item. So it looks like everything's working just as we wanted. Let's go ahead and create this list view right here so we can see these items as we create them. I'm going to open up VS Code again. I'm going to close app.js and let's open up our list view. For my list view, I want to receive my list of items as a prop. So I'm going to say props and we'll pass it items. So our items is going to come from our app.view file and we're going to write that in a second. The other thing I want to do is I want to import my list item and I'm going to loop through it up here. So let's say import list item from, and we'll do list item. We have to make sure we include it down here in our components and we can just do list item. So we're anticipating a list of items. Let's create a v4. So we'll do div v4 item in items. And I want to give this an index. So we'll do item, comma, index. And let's give this a key and set it to the index. So now we have our v4. We're going to loop through this list of items that we're receiving, and we provided a key index. Since we imported our list item, we'll do list-item. Inside of our list item, I want to pass it a prop of item, and this is going to be the item right here that we're receiving. So we should be able to say item, item, and let's also give it some style. We'll just do class, and we'll just call it item. We can close that off and let's jump down here and let's do our style and let's give our item some style. So we'll do dot item. Let's give it a background to match our title. So we'll do E6, E6, E6. Let's give it some padding. We'll just do 5 pixels, and we'll say margin top to give it some space in between each item, and we'll just do 5 pixels. Save that, and I think that should be good for right now. So we're receiving these items, we're looping through those items up here, and we're passing each individual item to this list item. And we haven't created our list item down here, but we're going to do that in a second. Before we create our list item, we need to grab all the items from our database and pass it to this prop right here. So let's do that. We're going to open up our app.vue. After our components, I'm going to go ahead and create some data. So we'll do data function, and we'll return, and I want to create a property called items, and we're going to grab the items from our database and we're going to put it right here inside of our items property. So let's create a method. We'll do methods, and we'll just call it getList. Our getList method is going to use Axios and a get request, and it's going to hit API/items. Then we want to do something with our response. So we'll use an arrow function, and we want to set the items so this dot items equal to our response dot data. So whatever data we receive in our response, we're hoping to receive a list of items. Go ahead and put it in this items. Make sure you spell items right. Then we'll do a catch. And this is just going to be an error. If there's an error, just console.log the error. So now we have our getList method, but we're not executing it anywhere in our scripts. Outside of our methods, Vue has the options API, and we should be able to hit a lifecycle event called created. When this component's created, I want to run my getList method. So we'll do this.getList. The last thing we want to do is we want to attach these items to a prop in our list view. So let's do items and set it equal to our items. So we'll Command S to save that. So we're basically saying pass a prop or a property called items with the items that we're storing right here into our list view. And we're saying right here, we're expecting a prop called items. So let's jump back over to Chrome and see if we have an item. When we saved that, our hot reload recreated our instance. And since we have created executing the getList method, it actually grabbed our first item. But we haven't built our list item yet. Let's go ahead and link that up right now so that we'll see some data in here. Back over to VS Code. This time we're going to go to list item. Now we said earlier our list item is going to receive a prop. So let's go ahead and do props and receive that item. We can get rid of this text right here of list item. Let's create a class for our individual item, and I'm just going to call it item. I know that each item in the list, I want to have a checkbox so you can check it off if you've completed it or uncheck it if you haven't completed it. So the first thing I'm going to do in my list item is I want to create a checkbox. So we'll say input, we'll do type equals checkbox. And when this checkbox changes, I want to execute a method. We haven't created the method yet, but I just want to acknowledge that at change, we want to execute a method. I'm just going to call it update check. I also want to attach this input checkbox to the item.completed property. So let's do a v model and set it equal to item.completed. So when this prop of item is received, it has some properties inside of it. One of those properties is going to be completed. We set it up earlier and it'll either be true or false. So I want to link that to our v model right here. I think that should be good for this. The next thing we want to do is we want to actually display the item name. So we'll use the mustache tags and we'll say item.name. I'm just going to put this inside of a span. So we'll do span and span. Now, depending on the completed status, I want to change the look of the item name. I want to actually put a slash through it. So let's give this some class binding. We'll say class and we'll pass it an array. I want to check for item.completed. And if it's completed, we haven't created these classes yet or these styles, but we will in a moment. So if the item's completed, I want to apply a class called completed. If it's not completed, I don't need to do anything. But by default, I want to set some just general text property. So I'm just going to call this item text. So if it's completed, apply the completed class. If it's not completed, you don't have to do anything. And then by default, we're just going to have an item.text. Let's create those real quick. We'll do style. We have completed. Let's give that some style. We're going to do text decoration, and we want to just do line dash through. So if it's completed, put a line through the entire text name. The other thing we want to do is we want to kind of like gray it out so it looks like it no longer needs to be done. And I'm just going to use 999999, and that should be like a grayish color. We also have item text, so let's create that. We'll do item text, and this is just the default text for the item. I'm going to set the width to 100%, so fill up whatever available width there is, and also do a margin to the left so it's not right on top of our checkbox. We'll just do 20 pixels. And while we're at it, let's also create this item class. We'll put it in right here. We'll do item. We'll do display flex. We'll also do justify content, center, and we'll do align items center. And let's save that. Let me move this back out. And the last thing I want to do is I want to create a button, and I want that button to be a little trash can. So when a user clicks on it, it'll delete whatever that specific item is in our list. Let's go ahead and add our click. And we didn't create this function yet, but we'll just call it remove item. And let's give this button some style. We'll just do class, and we'll set it equal to trash can. And let's import that trash can icon. We should be able to do font-awesome-icon and set the icon equal to trash. And let's give this trash can some style. We'll go down here right after our item, and we'll just do trash can, and let's give it some style. I'm going to set the background to the same as the background of our list. So it should just be E6, E6, E6. And then I want to give it a border of none. Let's give it a color of red. Don't click this unless you really want it gone. And we'll do outline none. That way it doesn't show a focus outline on it. We'll do Command S to save. We should be able to jump back over to Chrome and see what this looks like. So we have our take out the trash now. It auto reloaded for us because we're using that hot reload. That's why we see this already. But we have our checkbox. If I check it, I'm expecting it to change the style of our take out the trash. Now we got an error down here because we haven't created this update check function. So let's go ahead and create that update check function, and let's also do our trash can function. Back over to VS Code. So right after props, we'll do a comma, we'll do methods, and let's do our update check. And inside of our update check function, we're going to use axios.put because we created that put route earlier. And we'll do API/item/ and we want to append this item.id from our prop that we're receiving right here. So it should put the ID of the item we want to update. And then let's pass it some information. We're just going to pass it the entire item. So we'll do item this.item. And then after that, let's do something with the response. So we'll say then response, we'll use our arrow function. We'll say if response.status equals 200. So if it's successful, let's emit a change. Let's tell our parent component that this item changed. So we'll do this dot emit and then item changed. We haven't created this event yet of item changed, but we're going to do that in a minute. So let's also do a catch, and we'll do error. We'll do an arrow function, and we'll just do console.log error. We'll save that, and let's do this item changed event. Our parent to the list item is our list view. So let's go back to our list view, and let's add an event listener. So we'll do v-on, and we're listening for item changed. And when this item is changed, let's emit something to our app.view to let the app know something new happened. Go ahead and reload the list for us. So let's set this equal to emit, and we'll just call it reload list. So if an item changes, reload the list for us. We'll save this, and now we have to create another event listener on our app.view to listen for this reload list event. So let's go back to our app.view, and right here I'm going to tab this down on the next line, and after our items, we'll do v-on, and we want to listen for reload list, and we're going to set it equal to, so if this reload list event happens, we want to get list. We want to get the new list. So our child component saying, hey, reload the list for me because something new happened down here. On a really large application, you would probably use state to do this, but since this is just a really small to-do list, we're just going to use the emit events. So we'll just save that, and our application probably already reloaded in Chrome. So let's go over there. We'll click on take out the trash. We're not getting any errors down here in our console. Let's click on network. We see 1 and then items. Let me uncheck take out the trash. 1 and then items. So what's happening is this is our put request. If we click on it, we see headers, and this is our request method put. So it's telling our API backend, go ahead and update this. And then once that happens and the request comes back successful, we're telling our parent components to go reload the list. So it's automatically grabbing a whole new list every time we click this. Now that this is working, let's make our trash can do something. We'll go back over to VS Code, and we want to go back to our list item, and we want to create this remove item method. So right after our update check, let's add a comma and create our remove item method. Now we already created our route for this, and we should be able to use Axios delete, and we're going to hit the same route as above. We'll do API/item/ and then we just want to append this item ID. So we want to grab the ID and we want to do a delete request with Axios. What do we want to do with the response? Let's say response, we'll use our arrow function, and we're going to do the same thing we did before. So we'll say if response.status equals 200, let's just emit an item changed event. So we'll let our parent component know, hey, something changed. You need to regrab that list for us. So we'll do this emit item changed. And then lastly, let's just put a catch down here. We'll say catch error arrow function and just console.log an error if we have one. Command S to save that. And let's jump back over to Chrome, and we should be able to click our trash can. Pretty cool. So we were able to delete our item. Let's add it back. We'll say take out the trash. We'll click our plus button. Now you'll notice this time when we click the plus button, it hit our store, so we know it created this item for us, but it didn't tell our parent component to go grab that list again. So the item was created. If I click the refresh, we should see our item down here. Refresh. So we have our take out the trash, but let's tell our form to emit an item changed to our parent element. So we'll go back over to VS Code. This time we're going to go to add item. When we reset, when we say that this response is successful right here, let's do this dot emit, and let's just say reload list. Now all we have to do is go back to our parent element. After we save this, we'll go back to our app.view, and we want to do the same thing as we did right here. We're just going to copy this and we'll put it right here. So we're listening for this on reload list event. Go ahead and get the list for us again. So I'm going to save that. So let's go ahead and add a new item to our list, and it should automatically refresh down here. We'll just say make a sandwich. We'll click the plus. It added it to our list, but we didn't delete it right here. Let's just double check that. VS Code, and right here I put a double equals. That is incorrect. Make sure you fix that, guys. Remove that double equals, save it. We'll go back over to Chrome. Let's try this again. We'll just do clean the kitchen, click our plus sign, and there we go. So we're removing it from up here. We're appending it to our list of items, and we should be able to click and check these off. If we want, we can delete one. So I think this is a good stopping point. I'm going to delete these items, and I'm going to create a few to-do list topics for you. Like this video. Let's add that. Subscribe now. And hit the bell icon for notifications. I hope you learned something in this video. I'll be posting more with Laravel and Vue.js, so stay tuned and I'll see you in the next one.